Hello, preschool. Welcome to another story with Mrs. Ryan. One of the advantages for me is to be able to take out some of my older and most favorite books and share them with you. And this is probably my all-time favorite storybook. Now, I'm going to warn you, there aren't a lot of pictures in it, but it is a really good story. I hope that you will enjoy. And it is called The Tiny Little House. And it says Eleanor Clymer. Who do you think Eleanor Clymer is? You're right, the author. And we know that author writes the story, author writes the story, author writes the story, which why she comes first. And then it says Ingrid Fetz. Who do you suppose Ingrid Fetz might be? You're right, the illustrator. And we know that illustrators illustrate, illustrators illustrate, illustrators illustrate, which means she made the pictures and some very nice pictures too. Now we heard the title is called The Tiny Little House. What do you suppose this story might be about? You're right. I think you're right. A tiny little house. But also in the picture right here are two friends. Does that change your idea on what this story might be about? Maybe. Good guess. Let's take a reading of The Tiny Little House. Now, squeezed in between two big houses on a city street stood a tiny little house. Its windows were dusty, its walls had no paint, its door was locked. Long ago, it had stood by itself in the middle of a garden. A family had lived in it. But the city grew up around it. Men came and built a big building on one side of it. They built a big building on the other side of it, and the little house was squeezed in the middle. Boy, it sure is. You can hardly see it. Years passed, and the family was gone, and the little house stood empty. Nobody lived in it. Nobody cared about it. Nobody wanted it all. Nobody but Alice and Jane. Alice lived in one of the big buildings next door, and Jane lived in the other, and they were friends. On their way to school, they peered through the dusty window. Why doesn't someone live in it? Jane wondered. It's such a nice little house. I guess nobody knows it's here, said Alice. Nobody but us, said Jane, and Mrs. O'Brien. There is Alice and Jane. Now, Mrs. O'Brien was a little old lady who lived next door to Alice. Every day she went out with a basket on her arm, and every day she stopped to look at the little house, just as Alice and Jane did. They wondered what she had in her basket, and why she peered at the little house. But Mrs. O'Brien never told them. She just smiled and hurried away, and the little house stood empty. Then one day, when the girls were coming home from school, they saw that the landlord had unlocked the door. You see Mrs. O'Brien? I wonder why the landlord unlocked the door. What do you think is going to happen? I wonder if someone's going to come and live there. A short, fat lady and a short, fat man were trying to squeeze themselves inside. Oh, look, said Alice. Someone is going to live in it. But no, the fat lady shook her head. Oh, this won't do, she said. Oh, but it's such a nice little house, said the fat husband. What use is it when we can't even get inside? Asked the fat wife. Why, it isn't even big enough for one of us. And they went away. Darn, I thought somebody was going to live there. But then, again, the little house stood empty until one day 2 more people came, and they were tall and and thin, and they bent their heads and went inside. "This won't do," said the tall, thin husband. "Oh, but think how low the rent is," said the tall, thin wife. "What's the use of low rent when the ceiling is even lower?" asked the husband. "Why, we would knock our heads every time we stood up straight." And they went away. I suppose they're right. That would be very hard if you couldn't stand up straight in your own house. Now at last 2 people came who were neither fat nor tall. "This is just right," said the husband. "I can play my fiddle and you can play your harp, and we won't bother anyone." But the wife shook her head. "Don't you see," she said, "the fiddle and the harp won't go through the door." So they went away. The little house grew dustier each day. The mice danced on the floor at night, and the dust danced in the sunbeams by day. And when the lights were lit in the other houses, the windows of the little house were dark. The man who cleaned next door kept his mops and pails and brooms in it. That was all. Summer came and the street was hot. Trucks and cars roared by. Men with drills dug up the street and made clouds of dust and a terrible noise. Alice and Jane stood in front of the little house. "Oh, if only someone would use it," said Jane. "Somebody not too big and not too small." "But who?" "Why not us?" said Alice. "But it's locked," said Jane, "and we can't get in." "Let's pretend we can," said Alice, and she put her hand on the knob and turned it, and the door swung open. The man who cleaned had forgotten to lock it. "Let's go in," said Alice. She was brave. Jane was not so brave. "Can we?" she asked. "Come on," said Alice. Inside it was cool and quiet, and the noise of the street seemed very far away. They were in a little sitting room. It was empty except for some mops and pails and brooms. They tiptoed around and saw a little kitchen and a tiny little bedroom. "Oh, it's lovely," sighed Jane. "If only we could have it." "Let's pretend it's ours," said Alice. And they go inside. But the little house was so dusty. "Let's clean it up," said Jane. And they got to work, and they took the broom and the mops and the cleaning man had left, and they swept the floor, they scrubbed the kitchen, they washed the windows. "Ah, that's better," said Alice at last. "Oh, they are working hard, aren't they?" "Good work, Alice. Good work, Jane." But the little house needed furniture. What could they use? Now, out in the backyard, they found some boards and boxes, and they dragged them inside. "This box will be the table," said Alice. "And these can be the chairs," said Jane. But what could they use for a bed? "Let's run home and get some things," said Alice, and she ran to her house and gathered up some cushions. Where are you going with those cushions?" her mother asked. "Oh, I'll take good care of them," Alice answered as she dashed out the door. Jane took her dolls, dishes, and tablecloth. "What are you going to do with that tablecloth?" her mother asked. "Oh, I'll bring it back soon," Jane promised. They put the cushions in the bedroom. "This can be the bed," Alice said. And they put the tablecloth and the dishes on the table. Then Alice looked out the backyard again. Someone had thrown away some paper flowers. And here is a nice old milk bottle to put them in, she said. Now our house looks better, said Jane. We're ready for company. And then they looked at each other. But it really isn't our house, said Jane. We can't stay in a house that belongs to someone else. I know, said Alice. We're just pretending. And they felt sad. Pretending is fun, but sometimes you have to stop. Just then, Alice noticed someone looking through the window. Do you see who it was? It was Mrs. O'Brien. She can be our company, said Alice, and she opened the door. How do you do? She said, as her mother did when company came. Won't you come in? Thank you, said Mrs. O'Brien. I was just passing by. I thought someone had moved into this little house. It looks so clean. Oh, we're just pretending, Alice explained. But you may come in and sit down if you like. So finally they got some company. Pretending became fun again. Well, maybe I will, said Mrs. O'Brien. I've walked a long way and I am tired. Well, this is the best chair we had, said Alice. I'm sorry it has no back. These are our dishes, said Jane. I'm sorry we have nothing to eat. But they can still pretend, right? Oh, but I have, said Mrs. O'Brien, and she opened her basket, and it was full of cookies. There were sugar cookies and chocolate cookies and peanut butter cookies, and they smelled delicious. Have some, said Mrs. O'Brien. They're good, the girls mumbled, with their mouths full of crumbs. Yum. Have some more, Mrs. O'Brien urged. I made them myself. But where were you going with your basket full of cookies? Jane asked. Oh, I was trying to sell them, Mrs. O'Brien told her, but I haven't sold very many, and I'm tired of walking. Oh, I wish we could help you, said Jane. Suddenly, Alice jumped up. We can! We could use the little house! Use the little house? Mrs. O'Brien repeated. What do you mean? You could use it for a shop. Oh, of course, said Jane. And Alice took some paper and made a sign. See the sign? Cookies for sale. Very good ones. And she put the sign in the window, and then she spread the cookies out on the tablecloth. Oh, what a great idea! I like that idea. And soon some people came. First there were 2 boys with a wagon, and then a girl who was minding her little brother. Where are the cookies? They asked. Right here, 2 cents each, said Alice. And then she turned to Mrs. O'Brien. Is that right? 2 cents will be fine, said Mrs. O'Brien. And soon most of the cookies were gone. I see. I'll have to make some more, said Mrs. O'Brien. Well, those cookies must have been really good, because she sure didn't have any trouble selling them there. But then something happened. A big, angry man came in. It was the landlord. What's going on in here? He demanded in a loud, angry voice. Who are you and what are you doing in my house? I'm Mrs. O'Brien, said the old lady. I live next door. She looked very frightened. Wow, look at that angry landlord. I'm pretty sure I would be very frightened too.
Well, you can't stay here, said the landlord. Out! Everybody out!
Yes, 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 we were just going, said Mrs. O'Brien, gathering up her things. The children looked frightened too, all but Alice. Alice was brave. You never use this house, she said. Nobody wants it. Nobody cares for it. So we made it into a cookie shop. Oh my goodness, Alice, you are so brave. But she's also right.
A cookie shop, said the landlord. Well, then you must pay me rent.
Oh, said Alice. She had forgotten about rent. But now Mrs. O'Brien felt brave. Well, maybe I could pay rent if I could sell some more cookies, she said. There's a kitchen, said Jane. You could make them right here. Oh, what a great idea.
No, said the landlord.
Why not? Alice asked. I think it's a good idea.
What if nobody buys the cookies? The landlord asked. Then how will Mrs. O'Brien pay her rent?
Jane felt so scared that she wanted to run away and hide. She was not brave at all, and the man was so big and so angry. But this was no time to hide. Something had to be done. And suddenly she knew what it was. She took a sugar cookie and held it out to him. Taste it, she said. Can you taste it? Oh, she was very brave to do that. He said at his chews. Now taste that. And Jane holding out a chocolate cookie. Said the landlord. Now try this kind. Jane ordered, giving him a peanut butter cookie.
These are good. Are there any more?
They're all gone, said Jane, looking into the basket. Oh, now look at the landlord. He's not so big and scary after all, isn't he? In fact, I think he really enjoyed those cookies. They sure looked good. The landlord scratched his chin.
He said. Well.
And then he said, And then he scratched his chin some more. Then he said,
Well, all right. You may try it. But save some cookies for me.
I'll make a special batch just for you, said Mrs. O'Brien. In fact, I'll start right now. I'll go home and get my pans and flour and butter and everything I need. We'll help you, said the boys with the express wagon. We'll all help, said Alice. Oh, what a great idea! You could even live here, said Jane. Could I? Asked Mrs. O'Brien, looking at the landlord.
Oh, why not? He said, smiling at her.
And somehow when he smiled, he didn't look quite so big, and he certainly didn't look so scary. And now the little house has someone living in it at night. When the lights are lit in the other houses, its little windows have lights too. And the door is painted, and over it a sign says, The Little Cookie Shop. So that is the end of one of my very favorite stories, The Tiny Little House by Eleanor Clymer, which then turned into The Tiny Little Cookie Shop. And doesn't it look so much more happy now than at the beginning of our story? I like that story a lot. I hope that you did too. We'll stay tuned and there'll be some more stories later. Have a great day. Bye.